Ladies and gentlemen, there is a kind of loss that cannot be measured by money, cannot be mended by time, and cannot be mourned with tears. It is not the loss that visits us in funerals or in farewells. It is deeper, it is quieter, it is the greatest loss in life. The death of purpose, the burial of vision, and the silent funeral of dreams that never saw the light of action. You see, we often associate loss with things we can touch, people, property, or positions. But the most devastating loss is the one that happens within, when a person who once burned with ideas now lives in silence, when a mind built for greatness settles for survival, when a soul meant to fly resigns to crawling. This is not just an emotional matter, it's an educational crisis. Because if the highest aim of education is to ignite potential, then the greatest tragedy is not ignorance, but potential unused. In every classroom sits a future author who has stopped writing. In every community lives an inventor who never built. Not because they were incapable, but because somewhere along the line they began to believe they were unworthy. They lost not just motivation, but identity. And what causes this? Sometimes it's fear of failure, of judgment, of imperfection. Other times it's neglect. A system that teaches information but forgets to teach purpose. Or it's comparison, that thief of joy, which convinces people they're too late, too behind, or too ordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest loss in life is not when others walk away from you. It's when you walk away from yourself. When you stop believing in what you carry, when you forget why you began, that is the loss that echoes in the silence of unlived potential. But the good news? Loss does not have to be final. As long as breath remains, the classroom is still open, the pen still writes, the mind still creates, and the spirit still dreams. And if we as educators, leaders, and learners can rekindle the flame within even one soul, we have not just prevented loss, we have restored life. Many people believe that the ultimate loss in life is death, but if you examine it closely, you'll realize that death itself is not the most painful or tragic end. It is inevitable and universal. What's far more tragic is the slow, silent decay of purpose, potential, and passion, while a person is still alive. The human body may be breathing, moving, and functioning, but if the soul has stopped dreaming, if the mind has stopped growing, and if the heart has stopped believing, then something more profound than physical death has already occurred. This inner loss begins subtly. A child who once asked bold questions starts holding back. A student full of ideas begins to doubt them. An adult who once envisioned greatness chooses instead to blend into mediocrity. And slowly, unnoticed by the world, the fire inside begins to fade. No sirens go off, no headlines are written, but make no mistake, a significant death has occurred, the death of self-belief. The loss of hope, the fading of vision. Why does this happen? Sometimes it's failure. One setback becomes a defining moment, and rather than using it as a stepping stone, we adopt it as our ceiling. Other times it's fear of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. There are people who bury their dreams every day, not because they lack talent, but because they fear the cost of being seen. Then there is the weight of society's expectations, which often shape individuals into what's accepted rather than what's authentic. Slowly they become strangers to themselves, and the person they were born to be is replaced by the person they were pressured to become. Education, in its truest sense, is not just about filling minds with facts. It's about awakening individuals to who they are and what they carry. But when education is reduced to memorization and measurement, when it stops speaking to the heart, it can unintentionally contribute to this silent loss. A person may graduate with honors and still feel empty inside because the system developed their intellect but ignored their identity. This inner death is also fueled by comparison. In a world obsessed with measuring success by numbers, followers, grades, salaries, people often forget the immeasurable value of their uniqueness. They compare their beginnings to someone else's highlight reel and conclude they are not enough. And in that moment, something beautiful within them begins to shrink. The tragedy of this kind of loss is that it goes unnoticed. You can walk past someone every day who looks fine on the outside but is grieving the parts of themselves they've abandoned. They smile at you while silently mourning the dreams they once held. They work hard but feel hollow because their efforts no longer align with their essence. This is the greatest loss in life, not when life ends, but when the will to live meaningfully is buried under doubt, fear, and silence. One of the most sobering truths in life is that potential, once wasted, does not return in the same form. Time, once passed, cannot be rewound. Opportunities, once ignored or dismissed, often do not knock twice. And the tragedy of life is not in what we failed to receive, but in what we failed to become. Lost potential is not loud. It doesn't cry out or break down doors. But its consequences echo quietly through every unfulfilled moment, every unstarted project, and every unrealized dream. Potential is the raw material of greatness. It is what lies within every human being, the capacity to do, to create, to transform, to inspire. It does not discriminate between backgrounds, financial status, or environments. But potential is not permanent. It is perishable. It expires when it is not used, and that is what makes its loss so painful. A talent never developed is not the same as a talent denied. It is a gift left unopened. A light that was never switched on, a seed that stayed underground. Not because the soil was bad, but because it was never watered. Too often we comfort ourselves with the illusion that we have more time. We tell ourselves we will begin later, we will try tomorrow, we will pursue that dream when the circumstances are just right. But time does not wait for our fears to subside or our confidence to rise. While we delay, the world keeps moving and potential slowly fades into regret. The irreversible nature of lost potential is not just about missed careers or unachieved goals. It's about the ripple effects of what could have been. A teacher who never fully stepped into their calling may have missed shaping generations. A writer who never shared their words may have failed to comfort someone in pain. A leader who never rose may have left communities unguided. The cost of lost potential is not just personal, it is collective. Society suffers every time someone's inner greatness remains dormant. Fear, doubt, and procrastination are some of the main thieves of potential. They whisper lies about timing, readiness, and worthiness. And unless one recognizes that potential demands action, not perfection. It is easy to spend a lifetime planning without ever doing. Potential is not realized in theory, it is activated in practice. One step forward, even if uncertain, is worth more than 100 perfect ideas left on paper. The irreversible nature of lost potential should not fill us with despair, but with urgency. The present moment becomes sacred when we understand what is at stake. Every day becomes a decision. Will I leave my potential untapped, or will I invest in it with courage? Will I use what I've been given, or will I let fear convince me that someone else will do it better? What we don't use today, we may never get back tomorrow. And in that truth lies a quiet warning, one that calls us not to be afraid of failure, but to be afraid of never trying at all. Behind most failures in life is not a lack of ability, but a lack of belief. The world is full of people who had the talent, the intelligence, and the resources, but who still did not reach where they were meant to go. Why? Because somewhere along the way, they lost faith in themselves. They forgot who they were. They let doubt drown out their inner voice. And when self-belief dies, identity becomes fragile. Once a person loses sight of their identity, they begin to live reactively instead of intentionally. They start to copy others, chase approval, and shrink their own voice to fit the expectations around them. The loss of identity is not sudden. It happens in stages. It starts when someone begins to internalize the negative words spoken over them. When a child is told repeatedly that they are not good enough, not smart enough, or not capable enough, they begin to wear those labels like a second skin. Over time, the voice of the critic becomes louder than the voice of purpose. And as they grow, they begin to shape their life not around their potential, but around their pain. Slowly they drift away from who they are and become who others expect them to be. This is especially dangerous in educational settings. A student who struggles in one subject may begin to see themselves as unintelligent altogether. A young person who doesn't fit into the standard mold may start believing they are a failure. But the truth is, every person has a different rhythm, a unique brilliance that may not always be visible in traditional systems. When institutions, communities, and families fail to recognize and affirm that uniqueness, they contribute to the slow erosion of identity. And once someone stops believing in their worth, they stop trying. They stop reaching, they stop growing. Self-belief is the foundation upon which all achievement is built. Without it, even the best plans collapse under pressure. A person who lacks confidence will sabotage their own success before anyone else does. They will say no to opportunities not because they can't, but because they don't think they should. They will lower their standards, settle for less, and silence their own ideas, just to avoid the discomfort of standing out. And yet the saddest part is that most people don't even realize they've lost themselves. They keep moving through life, following routines, fulfilling roles, and chasing external validation, never pausing to ask, who am I when no one is watching? What do I truly want? What do I believe I'm capable of? Restoring self-belief is not about arrogance, it's about alignment. It's about coming back to the truth of who you were before the world told you who to be. Because when you know who you are, you stop living by default and start living by design. And when you truly believe in yourself, failure is no longer something to fear, it becomes something to learn from, rise from, and grow beyond. Education is one of the most powerful tools humanity possesses. It has the capacity to shape minds, open doors, and break cycles of poverty, ignorance, and limitation. But the true value of education is not found in the number of degrees a person collects, the grades they achieve, or the titles they earn. Its value is only fully realized when it is applied, when knowledge is transformed into action, wisdom, and impact. Without this transformation, education becomes a storehouse of unused potential, and that is one of the quietest yet most dangerous losses we face in society today. We live in a world overflowing with information. There is no shortage of facts, theories, or formulas. Students memorize historical dates, mathematical equations, and scientific laws. Professionals attend seminars, read books, and collect certificates. Yet despite all this knowledge, many still feel unfulfilled, lost, or disconnected from purpose. Why? Because information that is not applied becomes clutter in the mind. It remains theory instead of becoming transformation. Education must go beyond the classroom. It must move from the pages of textbooks into the real world, into decisions, relationships, leadership, and innovation. A person may study ethics, but still lack integrity. They may study communication, but still struggle to connect. They may understand business strategies, but never start a single venture. This disconnect between what is learned and what is lived is what makes education without application such a tragic waste. The purpose of learning is not just to know more, it is to be more and do more. There is also a common misconception that academic excellence guarantees life. But success is not built on what you know, it's built on what you do with what you know. A mind full of knowledge is powerful only if the hands are willing to work, the heart is willing to serve, and the spirit is willing to persevere. Application requires courage. It demands decision-making, risk-taking, and action. Without it, knowledge becomes passive, something that is admired but never activated. Moreover, when education is pursued only for the sake of achievement rather than application, it begins to lose its purpose. Students begin to chase marks, not mastery. They focus on passing exams, not solving problems. They seek approval, not understanding. In such a system, creativity is stifled, critical thinking is minimized, and true learning becomes secondary. An educated mind that does not act is like a lamp that is never turned on. It may be beautifully designed, but it provides no light. In the same way, when people choose not to use what they've learnt to help others, to build solutions, to better their communities, they are dimming the very potential that education was meant to unlock. The goal of education, therefore, should never be limited to personal gain. It must also be about responsibility, about how we use what we've learned to influence, uplift, and improve the world around us. Because when education is applied, it doesn't just inform, it transforms. As we reflect on the idea of the greatest loss in life, let us not limit our understanding to what is seen or commonly spoken of. The deepest losses are often invisible. The loss of purpose, the loss of potential, the loss of identity, and the loss of meaningful education. These are not marked by funerals or farewells, but by quiet resignation, silent regret, and untapped greatness. The greatest loss is not death itself, but what dies within us while we live. The dreams we silence, the passions we ignore, and the callings we delay. It is the irreversible waste of potential when what could have been is buried beneath what was never attempted. It is the loss of self-belief, the moment we forget who we are and begin to live as smaller versions of ourselves. And it is the failure to apply what we've learned when education becomes theory without transformation and knowledge is never turned into impact. But this message is not just a warning, it is a call to awaken the fire within, a call to act before it's too late, a call to believe not just in education, but in the application of it, a call to see every moment not as ordinary, but as an opportunity to choose growth over comfort, courage over fear, and purpose over passivity, because the true tragedy is not in what we lose, but in what we leave unused. Let us not be among those who simply exist. Let us be among those who truly live.